people in a moment.
I'll kick off in what, 30 seconds?
Yeah, I'm just letting people in now, so start 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Australian Catholic Super's latest retirement planning and retirement webinar. Today, I'll be being hosted with Boris. And Boris, if you'd be good enough to introduce yourself. Boris is one of our financial planners who sees members individually and assists them all the time. So Boris,
Thank
you could
you,
just say
Wayne.
hello.
Thank you, Wayne. I'm Boris, one of the senior financial advisors with Australian Catholic Super, and looking forward to this webinar with you, Wayne.
Thank you. Also joining us today will be Justin Colley behind the scenes. He'll be monitoring the chat box. So for those of you that have questions as we move along, feel free to just put those in the chat box. I'll circle back to Justin at the end just to make sure myself and Boris have answered those questions thoroughly. And if we need to readdress some of those, we can. Just a reminder to people that we are recording this session and it will be available on YouTube later in the week. And it is also being live streamed on Facebook. To commence, I'd like to do a quick acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I work and live and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also, too, additionally, just a reminder that today will be general advice. We do encourage people to pursue more specific advice and more detailed advice, and we will talk about the ways you can do that, and that usually involves dealing with people such as Boris or the financial planning team on a one-on-one basis. Boris, as an introduction, we know things have changed pretty recently and pretty dramatically over the last couple of years in terms of retirement goals. Would you be good enough just to address how some people's retirement goals have been affected and what their goals are currently, if you would?
Thank you, Wayne. Yeah, look, when people come to see us, typically they have a specific event in time, which is being retired or getting ready for the retirement. And typically, large amount of planning about retirement involves travel or family time, perhaps going away on a cruise, spending more time with the family, or doing simple things such as gardening. All those different plans, Wayne, as you can appreciate, would require different amount of income that you'd have to have in the retirement. And one of the most common ways that we see people prepare for the retirement is by utilising their superannuation benefits.
Thank you. And the obvious question that falls out of all this is, how much do I need and why is super so important? Well, the reason we encourage people to really stay on top of their superannuation and the details of their superannuation is to ensure that their employer is paying in the amount that they're meant to ensure that you're familiar with where your money's invested and even what insurances you've got. And also to using the portal and using the phone app, you'll also be aware of where to get resources and what other assistance is available. The main question that comes up, however, is people often ask, how much money am I going to need? How much money am I going to need to live on in retirement? And how much am I likely to spend? Well, the Australian Superannuation Fund Association has tried to put some numbers around this. And you can appreciate the difficulty when you're trying to come up with how much someone who's single or in a couple arrangement is going to need in retirement when you're talking about, you know, everyone from Hobart to Cooktown to Broome and Perth and everything in between. So it's a difficult task. Nevertheless, as a proxy, they've given the figures we can see in front of us. So for a modest retirement, for a single, just short of $29,000 a year. For a couple, as you can see there, roughly $41,500 for modest. But for a comfortable retirement, a couple would typically be looking to try and generate around $64,000, because that would fund what ASPA deem a comfortable retirement, whereas the single is at $45,000. Note too, on the left-hand side, just what the full age pension will pay if you qualify, and we will talk more about the age pension and how you qualify for that. But just to give you a sense of what am I likely to need in order to have these types of lifestyles, assuming you are debt-free. And to provide a little bit more detail on the definitions around modest and comfortable, ASFA have come up with a pretty detailed report, and we do encourage everyone to go in and have a look at it. And you can see there how they differentiate between comfortable and modest. For example, a reasonable car versus an older, less reliable car. Quality clothes versus reasonable clothes. And things like that. By its very nature, it has to be subjective. But nevertheless, it's a very good guide, if you like, to get a bit of granular detail around how much you will spend in retirement, because many people underestimate how much they will spend in retirement. One of the advantages of understanding not only your superannuation, but in being involved with an organisation that has financial planning people available to assist, is they're able to take a holistic view of your situation. So when we're talking about retirement, as critically important as superannuation is, there are other assets to consider. And when you're dealing with people such as Boris or anyone in the financial planning team, they will typically be able to consider these assets you have outside of super as well as super, because they're all resources you'll be using and hopefully be able to access, as I say, when you do enter that retirement phase. One of the major advantages with superannuation is obviously the tax. And just to rehash the situation, when you're in the accumulation stage, what we call superannuation, where you're building money up and you're contributing to super, but you're not drawing any money out of it, the earnings are taxed at up to 15%. Now, I say up to because there are potentially imputation credits in some of those earnings, which will mean that the tax payable is actually lower than that. But this amount of tax is paid by the fund. So it's not something that you need to concern yourself with your tax return. So it's all handled internally. Similarly, when you're in a transition to retirement arrangement, you'll pay up to 15% tax as well on the earnings. However, when you enter the account-based pension phase, now this is typically when people are fully retired and over 60, there is a zero tax rate applied on the earnings. So just to be clear on the tax situation, it becomes zero for the vast majority of people as they go into retirement. And that's one of the huge appeals of using the superannuation system. In terms of when you're looking to fund your retirement, we speak specifically of these three age brackets. And I'll ask Boris in a moment to speak to these categories, because there are different conditions for these categories and there are different tax rates occasionally for these various categories. So Boris, if I can just hand over to you just to speak to these areas, if you would.
Thank you, Wayne. So the first concept we need to remember is called preservation age, which is the concept of when you can access your super account. So currently, you can access your super account at 58 years of age if you are retired, or if you start in transition to retirement, you can access portion of your super at 58 years of age. However, if you access your super at 58 or 59 years of age, there could be a tax that applies to the benefits you take out of super. The moment you turn 60, those benefits become tax-free. And when you turn 65, there is absolutely no restrictions in how much you can take out. You can take the whole lot out of your super if you choose to, and there is no tax associated with those benefits.
Thanks, Boris. And just when we talk about money going into super, just a reminder where we are in terms of the superannuation guarantee rate. As you can see there, we're currently at 10.5, and it is scheduled to go up, as you can see there, over the coming years. So increasingly employers will be putting in more over the coming years. So that should help for people to build up their balance in superannuation. Of course, where appropriate, we always encourage additional contributions, and we'll speak about those shortly. But just so people have an understanding of the minimums they'll be receiving from their employer, it's those listed in this table. In terms of salary sacrifice, one of the most favoured ways of getting additional money into superannuation is via salary sacrifice. And one of the compelling reasons is, instead of paying what we call your marginal tax rate, which is the rate of tax you'd pay if your wages and earnings were sent to your bank account, you would instead pay 15%. So if we take the typical earner in Australia, who's in that $45,000 to $120,000 bracket, they would be paying a marginal tax rate of 32.5. However, if they were to salary sacrifice to superannuation, they would be paying a 15% tax rate. So there's an immediate tax saving, as you can see there, of 17.5%. Obviously, they can't access the money until they reach, as Boris mentioned, preservation age and have met what we call a release condition. Nevertheless, there are substantial benefits to be had from salary sacrifice. And I'll just ask Boris to speak through this example we've got in front of you, whereby we can see the benefits in terms of the super and the benefits in terms of the tax.
Thanks, Wayne. So as you pointed out, one of the benefits of salary sacrificing is, first of all, increasing your retirement benefit for the future retirement, but also you are saving tax when you're making the contributions into super. These contributions are called pre-tax contributions. So if we use, in this example, someone who's on $100,000 per year, per fortnight, this person before tax would get $3,846. On the left side, in the left column, we see that there is no additional salary sacrifice contributions. So the taxable income of $3,846 means that they have to pay roughly almost $1,000 worth of tax in a fortnight, which makes it about $2,884 per fortnight of net income. If this person's salary sacrifices 5% of their salary, so $192 per fortnight pre-tax, taxable income drops down by the same amount, but now take-home pay has dropped only down by $127 because of that tax differential. So if you can imagine, you put in $192 in your super account, but you only see a difference of $127, which over 10-year period amounts to more than $17,000 in pure contributions.
Thanks, Boris. Salary sacrificing is one of those contributions we call concessional. The reason we call it concessional is it's taxed at 15%, hence the name concessional tax. You're not paying your marginal tax rate. And other contributions that fit into this category are the superannuation guarantee amount that we just looked at, additional employer contributions, and also contributions that you may make yourself, which you then claim a tax deduction on. There's currently a cap of $27,500 that you can put in per financial year as concessional contributions. However, since 2018, there's been a slight change that where your balance is under $500,000, you can use what's called the unused proportion of the previous cap in a previous financial year. So for example, last financial year was 25,000. If I put in 20,000 rather than 25 and my balance was under 500,000, I would be able to use that additional $5,000 limit this financial year. So my limit for this year wouldn't actually be 27,500, it would actually be 32,500. So for those that are particularly interested in using their what we would call unused proportion, a good way to know how much you've contributed in previous years is on MyGov, and that will capture contributions that you've made to all superannuation funds if you've had superannuation funds other than just Australian Catholic Super. If we talk about the non-concessional contributions, and again, it's called non-concessional because there is no concessional tax treatment here. So we're talking about monies that are typically in your bank account and you've already paid your marginal tax rate on them. So you've paid your full amount of tax. So for these contributions, there's a much more generous allowance. So as you can see there, if you're under 67, you can put in $110,000 per annum, and you can use what we call a 3-year provisioning allowance, which allows you to put in up to 3 years worth in a single year. But it does mean you've used up your allocation for year 2 and year 3. Nevertheless, if you were to receive an inheritance or a large amount of money and you did want to get it in super, that is one way you can do so. As you can see there, when you're between age 67 and 74, the limit is 110,000 to contribute to super per annum. And once you get to 75 and over, there aren't those allowances to make further contributions. The thinking being that once you've reached that age, you really should be drawing down and enjoying your money rather than putting more money into superannuation. I'll ask Boris to speak to this slide, particularly because downsize is one of those new interesting ways to contribute sizable amounts to super, as well as the traditional approaches of spouse contributions and consolidation. So over to you, Boris.
Thanks, Wayne. So yeah, when we spoke about the holistic view of someone's retirement, you mentioned that the planner would take into account other assets that one would have when they're looking to retire. And typically, the largest asset that people would have is their house, their family home. Since quite recently, government has introduced a downsizer contribution, whereby if you held your house for more than 10 years and you've sold it, you can contribute up to $300,000 in your super. And for couples, that's obviously 2 times $300,000 if you're over age of 65. And this is irrespective of how old you are. So downsizer contribution is quite a handy way to boost your super savings if you choose to downsize and move to a place where you'd realize some equity from your house, or if you go to a retirement village. The other contributions too, Wayne, that are worthwhile mentioning for working spouses, in particular where one spouse earns more than the other, is called a spouse contribution. So in this instance, for example, higher earning spouse can make a contribution into other spouses' super and get a tax deduction of up to $540 per year. And finally, consolidation of super funds is another way to increase your super savings. I think the statistics show that per average working Australian, there are 3 super accounts at the moment. So if you have multiple super accounts, potentially you pay multiple fees, having multiple insurances. In effect, it's not as efficient as it could be. So speaking to somebody about consolidating your super accounts, it's usually a good idea here.
Thanks, Boris. And just when we talk about preservation age is increasing at the moment. And the reason being is for those born between or in the early to mid 60s, they're in what we call this transition phase. So as you can see there, if you're born between those dates on the left, your preservation age could be 58, 59, and it will top out ultimately at 60 if you were born after mid 64. So as I say, we're still in this period where we can't say people's preservation age is 60, because for those born in those date brackets, I should say, it's actually not. It shortly will be though. So things will become a little more simple, if you like, in years to come, where anyone approaching 60 will have been born mid 64 or later. So that'll make things a little bit clearer. We'll be through this this transition period, and preservation age will simply be a question of 60, and it'll be a question of when you meet a condition of release, which is typically when you cease an employment arrangement. One of the questions that often comes up is, how can I access my super? And when I do so, can I take it as lump sum or as an income stream? By setting up what we call an account-based pension or an allocated pension, the simple answer is yes, you can. You can take lump sums and you can also take income streams. So for example, for many people, they will want a monthly income payment, but they may too wish to withdraw a lump sum to update a vehicle or to renovate a kitchen or something like that. And the allocated pension allows that type of flexibility. So you aren't locked into taking lump sums or taking an income stream. You can actually be doing both. And when we talk about moving from the super phase to the allocated pension phase, think of it as you're moving from what we call the accumulation phase, where you're contributing. And by contributing, I'm talking about what's listed there: personal contributions, employers, the contributions, lump sums, government co-contributions, rollovers where you consolidate, or even, as Boris mentioned, that downsizer contribution where you may have sold a home. And then you're moving into the drawdown phase, where you're not contributing to the allocated pension anymore. You're simply drawing money from it, and it's obviously earning money as well. So that's how it's generating, if you like, its own internal income is from the assets that are being held. The other one we get asked quite a lot about is what happens if I'm not completely out of superannuation, but I'm not fully in the allocated pension either. Well, that's right. You can be in this transition to retirement phase whereby you're actually contributing to super, but at the same time, you're withdrawing down from super as well. And now you may say, well, why would I wish to do that? Essentially because for those that are aged over 60, it's a particularly tax effective way to substitute exertion income with superannuation monies and to salary sacrifice back into super. So you can see your superannuation benefits rising while your take-home pay is actually being maintained. So it can sound like a very difficult strategy. It's actually quite a straightforward one. And I might ask Boris, actually, if he doesn't mind, just to speak briefly on the TTR strategy, because I know it is a popular one for those still working in their early 60s.
Thanks, Wayne. So typically where I see the use for transition to retirement strategy is when someone decides to reduce their working hours. So if you decide to go, say, from full-time down to 2 or 3 days a week, and you still require additional income, so in other words, you can't afford to reduce hours, but you would like to, one of the strategies we can use is that transition to retirement, where you supplement portion of your income that you lost by not working those days by early access of your super. Sometimes we can see this strategy being used as well when we're trying to generate additional cash flows so that they can be recontributed back into the super in a way like a recycling strategy. And sometimes we see it being used when people have debt leading into retirement, and we generate the extra cash flow in order to generate additional cash flow and in turn reduce the amount of debt that they have before they retire. So it's quite a popular strategy. It's not for everyone, but that's where the benefit of getting an advice about appropriateness of it is quite handy.
Thanks, Boris. And now things get quite a bit more simple. When we've entered the allocated pension phase, we're now talking about typically people that are over 60 and have fully retired. So we're now drawing down on what we've accumulated. It's invested in the allocated pension. There is a minimum amount you need to take, and that's dependent on age. So if you're aged under 65, it's 4%. However, at the moment, for this financial year, the government has reduced the minimum by 50%. So it's actually 2% in the current financial year, but it will revert to the normal minimums after this financial year. So the normal minimums are 5% once you get over 65, and it progressively goes up as you get older and older. But just think about the discount on the minimum only applying till the end of this financial year. Again, it was done because I think people weren't spending a lot of money due to COVID. They weren't travelling and the like. So the government thought it was a good idea to halve the minimum requirement. It would also mean that balances in superannuation, in the allocated pension would be maintained because people weren't drawing down as heavily from them. And just a reminder that once you're in this structure, everything is tax-free. In terms of products, Australian Catholic Super has essentially got two options for people when they enter this phase. One's called Retired Choice, where you choose where the funds are invested. And by that, I mean you choose not just whether you want to have a diversified type fund as listed on the left, but you can choose the actual asset classes themselves. So from the list you see before you, you can choose as few or as many of these as you like. So you've got complete control over where your money's invested. Some people often have this concern that they may not have control over where the funds are invested. Well, if you follow the Retired Choice path, you absolutely do. But for those that choose not to, and there are a substantial number of members who would prefer not to make those investment choices themselves, there is an option that we call RetireSmart. And what RetireSmart seeks to do via this two-bucket strategy is essentially maximise growth while minimising volatility. So it seeks to do that on your behalf. So it uses this, as I mentioned, two-bucket approach, whereby the growth assets held generate distributions which go into what we call a cash bucket from which your pension payments are made. If the cash bucket has excessive funds in it, then that excess money is pumped back into the growth assets to help generate further cash distributions. So it's a very efficient way, if you like, of not needing to choose where your funds are invested, but allowing growth assets to do their thing, to provide cash distributions, to build up a cash bucket, and to continue to provide those essential pension payments. One of the other questions that comes up regularly is, when can I retire? And it's an interesting question because if you've got sufficient money, you can retire whenever you like. Usually what people are asking is not really when can I retire, it's when can I access my superannuation? And as we saw earlier, it's essentially preservation age where you've met a condition of release. They're the two key things to think about in terms of when can I get my superannuation. Do I have enough? We've spoken a little bit about how much income ASFA believe you will need in retirement. Now that will differ with everybody, and this is where we do encourage people to seek advice and to reach out to people such as Boris and get a real good indication of how much they think they will spend and what resources they've got. And the other factor that's come into play over the last several years, of course, is COVID, because it's meant in some cases people aren't retiring as they intended, and for those that are retired, they're not spending quite as they intended because the circumstances don't allow for that. If we have a look at a practical example here, and I'll ask Boris to speak to the slides coming, which show graphically how a typical allocated pension funds retirement. But if we have a look at this couple, so we've got a couple here, 65 years of age, $300,000 each. They are homeowners, they do own their home. They're asking for $63,000 as a couple per annum, which puts them in that comfortable bracket that we saw earlier. They don't have assets outside of super. Inflation's assumed at 2.5%. The rate of return is assumed at 5%. And there's a rising living standards of 2.5% to help meet that inflation amount. And everything expressed here is in present value. So there's no need for you to think, well, that's a 15-year or 20-year projected number that I have to discount back to today's values. No, everything's being expressed in today's values. So Boris, if I can ask you just to talk to this example of how this couple use their money in the allocated pension.
Thanks, Wayne. So the first thing I'll point out is that obviously we can't predict the future, but this is as close as we get to predicting the future. So one of the questions that we often get is how long that money is going to last in the retirement. What we do in that case is we run these retirement projections where we, under some assumptions, we can predict how long that money is going to last. So in this instance, we have a couple that will retire in half a year, so at 66.5, but they don't become eligible for age pension for another year, so at 66.5. As you mentioned, they require about $63,000 per year, and the returns we've assumed are all net of fees and taxes. So when we look at that blue shaded area on this first graph, we see that the assets start at $600,000 at age 65. So each of them have $300,000 in super, and we can see that on the axis we can see the ages. So from 65 till 100 plus. We can see that the blue shaded area gradually reduces down from $600,000, and it seems like it runs out. So they run out of financial assets at about 94 years of age. What that means though is not necessarily that they don't have any money left over. They will still receive full age pension, but they don't have any additional savings after 94 years of age. Now, if we look on the next slide, Wayne, we can see where that money is coming from, composition of income. So the red line on the top is that $63,000 that you need. On the axis, we again have the ages, so from 65 onwards. We can see that in the first year, the income entirely comes from these purple bars. Purple bars represent money coming from the respective super accounts, allocated pension accounts. Year after that, we can see that they become eligible for a bit of Centrelink, so that blue bar comes. As they become eligible from Centrelink, this couple obviously requires less money to be taken out of their own savings, so the purple bar becomes smaller. And likewise, as their assets are decreasing down with age, the Centrelink entitlements are becoming higher, which in turn becomes means that they have that they need less money from their own savings. And combination of these two sources of income ensures that their money lasts till about 93 years of age. After that, they become eligible for full age pension only. They don't have any additional savings, but they always have that option to downsize if they choose to.
Thanks, Boris. And we now come to age pension eligibility, always a topic people are very, very interested to learn more about. So we'll speak about the age where you're eligible. You do need residency status. We'll talk about the assets test and the income test, and we'll also talk about how much the full age pension is. So firstly, we need to speak about the changing nature of the age pension eligibility age. It is moving from 65 to 67. Traditionally, people have thought of 65 as the retirement age. However, as I say, it is moving to 67. We are in this transition phase, if you like, and fairly soon, as you'd imagine, pretty much everybody will be 67 years or more before they'll be eligible for age pension. We'll start with the assets test. It is fair to say most people are impacted by the assets test more so than the income test. So for the assets test, and I'll concentrate on the orange bars, to receive no age pension as a single who owns their home, you would need to have assets outside of the family home worth more than $593,000. And if you were a single non-homeowner, you would have assets exceeding $809,500 before you would be ineligible under the assets test for age pension. So if you're under those amounts, you will receive part age pension or potentially full age pension. The obvious question that falls out of this is, well, what's included? Basically everything other than the family home. So think of it as everything other than the home I live in. If I'm an owner-occupier, it's all counted. So if we have a look at a very typical situation, a couple homeowner, so this is my parents, for example, they can have assets outside of the value of the home of up to $891,500 before they would be ineligible for age pension under the assets test. And for a non-homeowner, just like the single, they have a more generous allowance because they've obviously got to fund rent and the like and accommodate themselves. So they're the ultimate caps, if you like, on eligibility for age pension under the assets test. And as you can see, there's what I would call a reasonableness test that's being applied here. And it's similar with the income test. So with the income test, for a single, you can see there you can earn up to $54,990 before you're ineligible for age pension. Or as a couple, you can earn up to $84,167. Again, we come back to this reasonableness, and the idea is if, for example, you're a couple and you're earning, $85,000 from your own resources, the thinking is you don't actually need the age pension because you're providing yourself with more than sufficient income. So that's the government's view on where the reasonable test falls, if you like. And the government will apply the test that minimises the age pension payment to you. So always bear that in mind. They won't use the test that maximises the age pension. They'll use the test that minimises the age pension. So if you do qualify, and let's assume you fully qualify, these are the amounts potentially you could be receiving. As a single, $25,155. As a couple, combined, $37,924, or just shy of $38,000. Or you could be in a situation whereby due to ill health and aged care, etc., you are a couple but you're living apart. And in that case, it's the single rate that applies. So you'll be each paid that $25,155. Another question that comes up quite a bit is the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card. And there are some criteria around it. It's reaching age pension age, but there is also a income requirement there, as you can see. So you need to be within those income brackets, if you like. So there is an income test. You need to be a resident, and the Commonwealth Seniors Card allows the cheaper medicine and bulk bill doctor visits. Think of the Commonwealth Card as giving you benefits that the Commonwealth is obviously responsible for. And people often get confused between the state card and the Commonwealth card. Well, the state governments and the territory governments do offer cards, but obviously on services they provide, and they regulate, which are typically utilities and public transport. So that's why you have often the two different cards. I might now go to Boris just to speak about estate planning. It's one of those areas that is quite complex, and people unfortunately probably don't address as early as they ought for fear of the unknown in a lot of cases, or just perhaps not wanting to speak of such things. So Boris, if I can turn to you on this one, that'd be great.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's often overlooked area of the advice. And when we talk about the estate planning, we talk about what we call estate assets and non-estate assets. So estate assets are things like your house, your bank accounts, investment properties, and so on. So for these assets, it is your will that decides who is the beneficiary of your estate assets. Will, it's important to understand, only comes into power once a person passes away. In that period between someone becoming incapable of making decisions or not in the best position to make decisions and passing away, you can appoint a power of attorney that can make decisions on your behalf, which you might not always be able to make. And the power of attorney can be either general power of attorney, so you can appoint someone for anything and everything, or you can have an enduring power of attorney that continues on until it's revoked. Now, a difference between the two is that general power of attorney actually stops when someone becomes mentally incapable of making decisions. So if you suffer from Alzheimer's, your general power of attorney it's not relevant anymore. You need to have an enduring power of attorney. As you can imagine, it's quite an important document. Care needs to be taken in whom you grant the power of attorney, because obviously by granting someone power of attorney, they can walk in your shoes, they can make decisions with your assets. Then on the other hand, we have what we call non-estate asset, which is your super. And that's why you get those letters from Australian Catholic Super to remind you that your nomination of beneficiaries are about to expire or have expired. So with non-estate assets like super, you have to nominate who your beneficiary is. And that could be exactly the same person that you nominated in your will, but you need to have a separate document that deals with that asset. As I mentioned, there are beneficiary nominations that you can make, and there are two types of nominations we have in Australian Catholic Super. One is called non-binding. That beneficiary nomination doesn't bind the super fund to act in accordance with your wishes. We have to consider them, but we have to wait till the courts decide who will get what. And then there's a binding nomination that provides a certainty, where super fund has no discretion whatsoever in how to allocate your assets. So as you can see, it's a pretty important document. Again, care should be taken when you having these documents. But in any case, it is a subject that should be considered earlier rather than later.
Thanks, Boris. Also, too, Boris, if I can just ask you to talk about the equally uncomfortable area of aged care. And the reason I asked Boris to speak on this one is because you're often not dealing with the person impacted. That is, you're often dealing with the children of the person in need of the aged care arrangement. So Boris, if I can just ask you to address
Correct. And not just children, but the other spouse, for example. So at the start, when we spoke about planning for retirement, we've spoken about all the different goals people have when they retire: traveling, spending more time with family, helping kids, grandkids, doing gardening, etc. What we haven't seen there is, and nobody plans for it, is nobody plans to care for somebody else. But that unfortunately often happens. And it happens when in worst case instances, you don't have enduring power of attorney, so it becomes very difficult to plan, or you don't know what happens, how to fund the aged care expenses. So at Australian Catholic Super, our financial advisors are all accredited to give you the advice about aged care. We will take into account your needs and needs of your loved ones. And typically what we can help you with is we can help you decide how to pay those fees, how to try to minimize those fees, and how to maximize your Centrelink entitlements that you might be eligible for. And at the same time, and unfortunately that's one of the facts with the aged care, because average life expectancy of a person when they go to aged care is unfortunately only 3 years. Financial planner can also assist you in planning for that next step, where your estate benefits are maximized by having adequate planning in place.
And Boris, you touched on it there. If you could just speak a bit further, if you would, just on how typically you're able to assist people in all sorts of ways when they're going into retirement, but also when they're well into retirement, if you like.
Yeah. So look, one of the misconceptions we have is that Australian Catholic Super planners can only help Australian Catholic Super members. We can help anyone. If you have a spouse that's not our member, we can help you there too. We can help you with the investments that are not just super related. Some of the other things we can assist you with is we can save you money for your retirement. We can help you maximize the Centrelink. We can give you the idea of how long your money will last in the retirement. When can you afford to retire under certain circumstances? Typically, when we talk about the retirement, it's if you think about it, if you retire at 30 and you live until you're 90, if you retire at 65, I should say, and you live till you're 90, we're talking about quarter of a century retirement. So retirement is not just one goal. There are short-term goals, there are medium-term goals, and there are long-term goals. And the short-term goal could be that you're going to be traveling in the first 5 or 10 years of your retirement. Medium-term goal could be that you then spend a bit less money in the next 10 years of your retirement. And in the last 10 years of your retirement, for example, you're planning for aged care expenses. So we can look at all those goals and give you the idea of how to best structure your assets for them. We can help you with your estate planning. We can give you the advice about investing outside of super, for example, for people that are too young to be able to access money from super. We can help them with investing outside of super or life insurances. And as I said, we can give you advice about the partner, even if the partner doesn't have the account with us, or any other family member that doesn't have account with us.
In terms of other general information we're able to provide, please feel free to reach out to people like myself. I'm one of the regional managers. As I mentioned earlier, we've got, and I will mention it again, we've got the portal, we've got the phone app where you can get all sorts of information on your account. You can also get forms and whatever you may need. You can also do quite a few different transactions and update your information. We do encourage people as well to use what we call these projection tools. Ours is called RAPTA, Retirement Adequacy Projection. But there are many, many available. MoneySmart offers a really good one on the ASIC website, but there's many of them about. So it will give you a very clear indication of how long your money can last. And again, we encourage people to get all the help they possibly need via the fund, which leads us to, we've spoken about the advice offerings in terms of the more comprehensive, but we've also got other services available for people. And Boris, if I can just ask you to talk to the limited advice service, if you will.
Thanks, Wayne. So we do offer 2 tiers of advice. Simple advice is called limited advice. This is over the phone or over the Zoom advice, where you can get the advice about contributing money to super. So we've spoken about salary sacrifice contributions and those catch-up provisions. Our advisors can give you advice about that. If you're wondering whether you invested in the right fashion, our over-the-phone advisors can help you with that. They can also help you with the topics such as insurance in your super accounts or the transition to retirement for some simple cases. If, however, you need a little bit more than this, then we can offer you the second tier of the advice, which is comprehensive advice. So we can look at more topics than just one topic here. We can look at everything holistically. We can help you with advice on the contributions and the limits, how to save money for your retirement, how to maximize your Centrelink. As I said previously, we can look at how long your money will last in your retirement. Look at the goals, whether they're short, medium, long-term goals or all combined, estate planning, and again, advice about non-super investments or non-super related insurance policies.
Thanks, Boris. And just to give people a sense of what the member portal looks like, if you haven't had a chance to go to it, as I say, absolutely be registered for it and go into it, because it will give you displays such as this, where you'll be able to see all your account details, your insurance details. You'll be able to do some transactions there if need be. You'll be able to get fact sheets and information. It'll also provide you with the contact numbers to seek further advice that myself and Boris have been speaking about. But it will allow you to, not only see your balance, but make a contribution, change investment options, work out and understand your insurance, nominate a beneficiary. As mentioned, that is critically important, and we would encourage everyone to ensure that they do have a beneficiary nominated on their policy, and many other things. Similarly, the phone app is now available and has been for 6 months or so. So if you haven't had a chance to download the phone app, please do. It's been a big hit, and many members appreciate just having such access to information so easily, because we've never before been able to access our superannuation information so readily, and frankly we've never been able before to access assistance so easily as we are now. We've got general support, we've got limited advice, we've got comprehensive advice. There's people like myself, RMs, who are able to assist in limited advice ways. And we've got, as mentioned, a comprehensive financial advice team. So please make use of it. At this point, I'm going to circle back to Justin, who's been monitoring the chat box, just to see if there's any questions outstanding or if there's anything we can address. So if I can just throw to you, Justin, that'd be terrific.
Thanks, Wayne and Boris. You've both done a great job presenting this webinar this morning. There hasn't been too many questions that you haven't answered, but I will just go through a couple just to reinforce some of the things. But one is about RetireSmart, and it is, what percentage is kept in a cash bucket? Does Australian Catholic Super Retirement Fund keep that percentage stable between the cash and growth bucket?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. That's a good question. So RetireSmart pension starts initially with 2 years worth of pension payments. This cash bucket gets, the pension payments get paid out of the cash bucket, which gets topped up frequently from the distributions and dividends that the growth investment bucket gets. And then if your balance in your cash bucket falls to less than 6 months worth of payments, Australian Catholic Super then automatically sells some of the growth investments you have and tops up your cash investment bucket. So you should have at any point in time anywhere between 6 and 24 months worth of pension payments in cash.
Right, thanks, Boris. The next question, and I'll keep it to you, Boris, is can you provide, is your super balance counted in the asset test as a couple?
Yes, if you're of age pension age. So if both of you are of age pension age, then your super balances are counted as the asset, whether it's in super or in pension. But if one member of the couple is pensioner or age pension age, and the other one is not, then the assets or super of the younger couple member is not counted as an asset until they reach age pension age.
Thanks, Boris. And the last one that we'll cover is, can you please provide an update of the planned merger with Uni Super? Did you want me to handle that one? A few nods there. So on the 1st of December, Australian Catholic Super have announced we are merging with Uni Super in 2022. The exact date is not known yet, but it'll be sometime between June and September this year. Both funds are going through the comprehensive due diligence, and the heads of agreement will be signed in February. And then we will know a lot more about dates and whatnot, and be able to share with our members. And we will write to all our members and let them know when the merger is taking place and the date and so on. But this stage, there's not really much of an update other than we are merging this year, and the dates will be confirmed towards the end of February, early March. That was all the questions that have come through. So I'll hand back to Boris and Wayne to wrap things up. So thank you.
Thank you, Justin. We've just covered questions, as Justin mentioned, but we do encourage you, if you do have any further questions, by all means, just let any of us know. You've got all our contact details. Once again, I just want to thank everyone for their attendance this morning. A big thank you to Boris for those more technical questions. Much appreciated. We will be doing seminars at some point, and these were intended to be seminars, but due to COVID, we just weren't able to do them safely in that manner. But we do look forward to getting back to schools and getting back to those RSLs and clubs and the like, and speaking to you all face to face. So until then, stay safe and keep in touch. So thank you and have a great morning.
Thank you all. Take care.